She was just the water girl, the quiet one with ropes and a medkit. Until one shot from a sidearm at 432 meters changed everything. They laughed, underestimated her, called her useless, until she saved the entire squad from a kill zone. Now whispers of whisper echo through the mountains, because the deadliest sniper isn't always the one carrying the biggest gun. Welcome to my channel. They told me not to touch the rifle. Said I was only there to manage water and ropes. Standard logistics. Keep her away from the heavy stuff. One guy muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The others laughed, a lazy kind of laughter that didn't even try to hide the condescension. I didn't say a word, just kept checking the medkit straps and adjusting the tension on a side pack. 40 minutes later, as the patrol cut through a narrow gap in the Helix Range, somewhere between Utah's Red Rock Canyons and the open scrubland, gunfire cracked like dry branches snapping underfoot. The squad dropped. Panic. Confusion. Then one clean shot rang out from behind. And just like that, silence. The sniper on the ridge was down. Sergeant DeShields turned his head, eyes searching the rear. Who the hell took that shot? Private Malcolm looked stunned. I think that was Sky. Sky. That's me. Skylar Dane. 32 years old. Light skin, medium build, dusty auburn hair. Born in the high plains outside of Great Falls, Montana. I'm listed on the roster as Field Logistics and Support Officer. That's a nice way of saying I carry water, set rope lines, manage med supplies, and balance the squad's gear weights before every climb. I was never issued a long gun. My official weapon? A Beretta sidearm. Bare minimum. Regulations. Most of the team called me the pack mule behind my back. A few used it to my face. Sky, you think this is boot camp? You think you're gonna Rambo your way into the real squad? One guy had laughed while I rechecked carabiners before a cliff rappel. I just smiled and clipped in. Every morning, I was up before the rest, brushing dust from rangefinders and realigning the optics on their training scopes. Nobody asked me to. Nobody thanked me either. When the others ran shooting drills, I stayed behind the line. Quiet. Observing. No one ever handed me a weapon. Corporal Vasquez once joked, but she couldn't pull a trigger if her life depended on it. Another time, while loading up the base truck, someone tossed me a half-empty canteen and said, "You want to feel useful? Go fill that up, sweetheart." I didn't respond, just walked past and kept doing the work. It's funny, isn't it? You can be right there, 5 feet away, and still be invisible. They talked about me like I was gear. Necessary, but not human. Sky, hang back with the backup rations. Sky, treat any wounds. Sky, don't slow us down. And I never argued. Never asked to be included in drills. Never once said, I know how to shoot. But every night, while the others threw cards or talked trash over MREs, I was out under a red LED headlamp, sketching the ridgelines by hand, noting wind direction, drawing pressure maps from memory. They thought I was just being diligent with supply lines. None of them realized what I was really preparing for. When I cleaned my sidearm, I handled it like it was sacred. My fingers knew it well. The weight, the pull, the tension of the safety. Every round loaded in silence. Every snap of the slide part of an old rhythm burned into muscle. Once, while tightening my belt before a climb, someone smirked and said, "That little pistol looks bigger than you. You sure it's not just for show?" I smiled. Safety's always worth carrying. They laughed, called me nervous, called me weak. I wasn't weak. I just knew better than to waste breath proving something to men who wouldn't listen. I hadn't signed up to shoot. Not officially. But in my mind, I'd made one promise. If that moment ever came, I'd be ready. No hesitation. No shaking hands. To them, I was just the quiet one. The gear girl. Reliable. Quiet. Harmless. They didn't know. Not yet. They were about to find out. 3 days into our mountain patrol, the squad made a stop at a plateau marked on the map as Stone Hollow 7, though the veterans all called it Dead Man's Nap. The elevation cut the oxygen thin, and the jagged shale underfoot made it easy to twist a knee if you weren't paying attention. I was kneeling by the supply crate, adjusting the paracord loops on the secondary med bag, when Lieutenant Cross walked past. He stopped cold, watching as I angled the reflective side of my sidearm across a steel cup, catching a distorted glint from the scope of the sergeant's training rifle 50 meters ahead. "What was that?" he asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I met his gaze calmly. Scope check. Refraction and glint test. His eyebrows rose, just slightly. Where'd you learn to check angles like that? I stood up, brushing dust from my hands. In places where the fog swallowed sound before it reached the ground. It wasn't a real answer, but it was the only one I was going to give. He didn't press, just nodded slowly and moved on. Later that night, Corporal Jensen was digging through the gear cache for bug spray and came across my notebook. It was wrapped in a rubber band, tucked under spare gauze and hydration salts. He flipped it open out of boredom. What he found stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't just a field journal. It was a sniper's playbook. Hand-drawn elevation charts. Bullet drift over altitude. Moisture factor corrections. Range logs that went back 5 years, each one with environmental conditions and accuracy percentages. One of the entries read, 405 m, ridge crosswind. Delay 0. 8. Drop, 2 centimeters. Adjustment, 2 clicks high right. Hit confirmed. These weren't simulations. These were real engagements. He passed it to Private Taylor, who read a few pages and whispered, "These aren't drills." The log had coordinates, mission timings, observations on potential escape routes. It was the kind of thing no one writes down unless they know exactly what they're doing and have done it for real. That was when the whispers started. By morning, I could feel it. Their stares were no longer dismissive. They were uncertain, suspicious, curious. The air had shifted ever so slightly. One of them muttered, "I heard she trained with recon at Redfield Range." Another, "Nah, I think she was pulled from sniper school after some medical issue. But her scores were perfect, better than anyone." And another, more cautious, "I heard she was in one of those black units. You know, the kind they never admit exist." I didn't say anything. I just rolled my mat, folded my thermal blanket, and marked wind speeds in my book like nothing had changed. But things were changing. That afternoon, during a weather drill on a mountain saddle north of Granite Spine, the squad was struggling to get clear visuals through low fog. Everyone was squinting through binocs, trying to identify terrain features. Vasquez grumbled, "Visibility's trash. I can't see past that log." Without looking up, I spoke. 2 o'clock. About 400 meters. There's a man with a metal frame pack. Third tree past the collapsed pine. The metal's bouncing back the echo differently. He whipped around, lifted his scope, and frowned. "How'd you? There's nothing there." I kept my voice level. "That sound you're hearing? It's bouncing in a tight arc, hit the rock face, came back skewed left. Listen for the short pop in the echo. Metal does that." He didn't answer, but Cross, standing nearby, turned and gave me a look I hadn't seen before. Not curiosity, not annoyance. Respect, or at least the beginnings of it. "Dane," he said, "how do you know about sound refraction?" I shrugged. "Things I picked up. You hear a lot when no one's talking to you." By then, the questions were stacking up. Why did I always pause where the terrain gave clear line of sight? Why did I instinctively scan for movement on the ridgelines, even when we weren't under threat? Why did my post-patrol routines always include quietly checking each squad member's ammo count, disguised as a med check? They started watching me more closely, not out of suspicion, out of wonder. That night, while I stepped out to refill a flask, someone opened my pack again. This time it was Sergeant Vega. He found the second notebook, the older one, bound in battered leather. Inside were diagrams of scope adjustments, annotations of confirmed hits, years of target notes. No bragging, no stories, just numbers, angles, wind, drift, and hits. He didn't say anything when I returned, just looked up from where he sat by the fire and gave a small, silent nod. And that was when I knew. They were starting to see me, really see me, but they still didn't understand. Not yet. It was the 5th day when the ambush came. The squad was making its way through a stretch of canyon just east of Laramie's Cut, a place so narrow and steep it felt like the mountain itself was watching. The morning had been routine, gear check, rations split, route confirmed. Lieutenant Cross was leading the forward element, with Vasquez and Reed scouting ahead. As usual, I was assigned to hang back, 50 meters behind with the trauma bag and secondary water packs. "Stay behind the rock line," they'd said. "Trail us after 15 minutes. That's all it took to change everything. I was adjusting the load straps on my hip when it happened. A crack, sharp, high, snapped through the canyon air. Then came a second, lower and slower, echoing off the stone walls. Gunfire. Not drills. Not misfires. Real. The comms lit up. Cross was shouting. "Sniper! Ridge right. We're pinned. Get cover. The canyon had funneled them into a trap. A natural kill box. One shooter with high ground. A perfect arc of fire and nothing but exposed targets below. I heard the scramble of boots. Shouts. Rock burst from the impact of high-velocity rounds. Where's Reed? Reed's down. Mason, rifles jammed. Call backup. Backup's 40 minutes out. The Ridge sniper wasn't rushing. He was methodical. Firing. Waiting. Reacquiring. Choosing his shots with purpose. I could tell by the rhythm. Whoever was up there wasn't some lucky opportunist. He was trained. And he was going to kill them all. From my position 50 meters behind, I was just outside the kill zone. Just far enough to be ignored. Just far enough to stop it. I dropped behind a shale outcrop, breathing through my nose, slow and calm. I unholstered my sidearm, the only weapon I was ever allowed to carry, and steadied it against the rock. My left hand slid automatically over the barrel for balance. My right thumb rested on the slide. I closed one eye, calculated the angle. 432 meters. Ridge elevation 1. 8 degrees. Wind cross at 12 millimeters. Drift delay. 2. 3 seconds. The sniper's scope flashed. A blink of sun on glass. Tiny but unmistakable. He was adjusting. One chance. One shot. I exhaled. Squeezed. The sound was barely louder than a twig snapping underfoot. But across the canyon, the sniper's scope erupted in a starburst of shattered glass. His rifle slipped from his hands and tumbled down the rock. He followed it moments later, arms flailing, head limp. Silence. Utter silence. From the canyon floor, the team had gone still, waiting for the next shot. Bracing. None came. Status. Cross called out over the radio, voice tight. A long pause. Then Malcolm's voice, quiet, uncertain. Target neutralized. From the rear. They looked back and saw me, still in position. Still crouched, still holding the sidearm steady with both hands. Barrel steaming slightly in the cold air. I stood slowly, holstered it. Cross's voice crackled in my ear. Dane, was that you? I clicked on the mic, standard counter-sniper protocol. Target was visible. Scope glint confirmed. Angle calculated. You, his voice faltered. With a sidearm? I began disassembling the weapon, sliding each part into its slot with clean, practiced movements. I spoke as I worked. Norwegian Alpine Recon. 3 tours. Pulled from active after a blast injury. Partial hearing loss. Medically discharged. They said I couldn't stay in sniper rotation. No one answered. So I kept talking. But my eyes still worked fine. It hit them then. What they'd been walking with all along. The quiet girl who carried water. The one who never argued. The one they never trusted with a rifle. I saw it in their faces when I reached the base of the canyon. Shock mixed with something else. Not fear. Not exactly. Something closer to awe. Vasquez stepped forward, mouth dry. Sky? I owe you. I mean, you don't owe me anything, I said. I owe you a safe return. That's the job. Cross came close, his eyes fixed on mine. You were tracking him. I nodded. Since we entered the canyon. Saw his flash 15 minutes ago. Gave him a chance to reposition. And when he didn't, I made the call. He looked back at the ridge. At the shattered scope and crumpled figure. You never said anything. Never put in for a combat role. Why? I stared at the ridgeline for a long moment. Because the safest place for a sniper is where no one's looking, I said. And sometimes the only way to protect the team is from behind. We moved out fast. Once a sniper breaks silence, others are usually close by. Wolves don't hunt alone in terrain like that. I kept pace with the squad now. No more trailing 50 meters behind with the trauma bag. Nobody said it aloud, but no one asked me to fall back either. They gave me center position. Cross came up beside me during a pause at a narrow incline. He handed me a canteen and asked, "How long since you left active duty?" 17 months, I replied. Medical file says I've got 25% hearing loss. Left ear only. Peripheral damage from an IED into Tajik Pass. He studied me. But your sight? Untouched. He didn't press further. Just nodded and said, "You ever miss it?" I paused. Every time someone thinks I'm just carrying rope. From that point on, things shifted. Quietly, but undeniably. The next morning, during recon brief, Cross asked me to weigh in. "Sky, you see any risk on this route?" he said, tapping the map near Eagle's Drop. I pointed to a cluster of pines layered over loose shale. South-facing slopes, unstable. too soft to hold a line underweight. But that ridge here, I tap to the left. It gives cover, angle, and an escape route if we need it. Plus you've got a 180 degrees firing view across the basin. No one interrupted. No one smirked. Vasquez gave a slow nod. We go that way, then. No jokes. No questions. After breakfast, I noticed my gear had been quietly reorganized. Someone had redistributed some of my load. Took one of the 2 med bags from my pack and split it between the others. It was a small thing. But to me, it meant everything. They were adjusting. Not just to the new information, but to me. For the first time, I was no longer a burden. I was backup. They started calling me by name. Not Water Girl. Not Logistics. Just Sky. Cross rotated me into watch posts with wider range. On our 3rd night past the canyon, he posted me on top of Ridge 6, where the wind hits hardest, but the visibility is best. That's not where you put someone you don't trust. That's where you put the one you count on. Later, at camp, I pulled out my weather log and began updating pressure readings and humidity notes. Vasquez sat down next to me. He didn't say anything at first, just watched. Then, you always keep logs like that? Since my 2nd year in the field. He pointed at the elevation column. You using this to adjust for aim? I nodded. Wind resistance changes with altitude. Temperature affects it more than you'd think. Even sweat can shift your scope if it pools under your cheek weld. He stared for a moment, then chuckled softly. We really didn't have a clue, huh? No, I said quietly. You didn't. There wasn't bitterness in my voice. Just honesty. He didn't apologize. Didn't need to. Sitting there, listening, was enough. By the time we reached Base Camp 12, the tone of the whole unit had changed. You could feel it in the way they moved. Sharper, tighter, like a team with an extra set of eyes they now trusted. One morning, during a fog drill, Taylor fumbled with his scope. Couldn't see past 150 meters. I walked up beside him and pointed. Line up with that pine. Count 3 left. Adjust 2 degrees up. There's your mark. He did, and gasped. How? Fog displaces light differently, depending on moisture content. Look at the ripple, not the mass. His mouth hung open for a second. Damn, he muttered. You should be teaching this stuff. I gave him a small smile. I've been teaching it. You just weren't listening before. It was during one of those drills that Cross made it official. Dane, he said one afternoon, combat range is hot in 15. You're in. I looked at him, unsure I'd heard right. Repeat that. You're shooting with us. Officially. I nodded once. Tried to keep my face neutral. But inside, I felt like the ground had just shifted under my feet, in a good way. When we reached the range, I laid out my wind log, calibrated distance, and adjusted for elevation. While others chatted or fiddled with their scopes, I knelt, eyes closed for a second, feeling the pull of the air around me. Reed was watching. Where'd you learn to do that? Norway, I said simply. In snow so quiet you could hear the barrel cool. When it was my turn, I stepped up. First shot, center. Second, wind correction, edge. Third, adjustment, dead center. Cross whistled. That's not rookie work. No, sir, said Vasquez behind him. That's Sky work. That's when the team started carving a new name into the camp ledger. Sky Dane. Last shot always lands. By the time we reached the Basin of Hawks, a wide open stretch between 2 sun-baked cliffs, we moved differently. Tighter, quieter, like a crew that knew how to breathe together. The weather turned hot, the kind of dry heat that doesn't warn you before it hits. The rocks shimmered. Dust coiled up from every step. I kept my journal tucked inside my vest now. Not because I needed it close, but because the others were asking to see it too often. One morning, Vasquez came over while I was sketching drift lines. Mind if I sit? I didn't look up. Sure. He watched me draw 2 arcs across a page. That top one's hot barrel. Wind cutting east. The lower's cold barrel. Morning stillness. He whistled softly. Damn. It's like watching a cartographer of bullets. I chuckled. You think in patterns, Sky? Always. That afternoon, Reed found me adjusting my sidearm and asked if I'd show him how to read mirage patterns through the scope. A few weeks ago, that would have been unthinkable. Now he was watching me like I held secrets the manuals had forgotten to include. They'd started including me in the tactical briefings now. Sky, anything look wrong about this sector? Yeah, I said, pointing at a line of dry brush against the ridge wall. Wind would push that east. If it's standing still, it's being sheltered. Could be a nest or a dugout. They changed the approach angle based on that. Found the hide 30 minutes later, unoccupied, but still warm. Whoever had been there had moved recently. But now the unit knew I wasn't guessing. I was reading the land. Even Cross looked at me differently now. Less like a quiet background presence. More like a compass. At the next base checkpoint, our unit had a quick debrief with regional command. Routine logistics handoff, nothing big. While the others handled gear rotation and inventory, I stepped into the supply tent to review medical records and check on resupply. That's when I saw him. Lieutenant Harmon. Tall, built like a statue with a clipboard. He squinted as I approached. You Dane? I am. He had my uniform. Combat rotation now. Recently shifted, I said. Support roles before that. He gave a low nod. Figured. Words coming up north. I paused. Word. Yeah. We got whispers in the ridge posts. Quiet support tech on Southern Patrol. Sniped in ambush with a pistol from 400 out. He raised an eyebrow. That you? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He gave a low whistle. No wonder command's sniffing around. I folded my med checklist, tucked it away, and moved past him. Later that night, while I cleaned the scope on a standard-issue rifle Cross had lent me for range practice, Reed came over with a fresh box of ammo and something in his hands. A small slab of wood, smooth, with a phrase carved in messy block letters. The quiet ones carry the loudest answers. I looked up. Who did this? Reed shrugged. Taylor, I think. Or maybe Vasquez. Doesn't really matter, does it? He dropped the ammo box next to me. We'll sand it and mount it on the range post. You cool with that? I gave a small smile. Yeah, I'm good with that. Word kept spreading. Not in a flashy way. Not through official channels. Just one radio whisper at a time. A squad from the east flank came by our post to swap out gear and stayed longer than necessary. Just long enough to ask if the sniper story was true. Cross waved them off. Ask Sky. They looked at me, a little skeptical. Sidearm, really? I shrugged. Only had one shot. Didn't feel like missing. That night, I stepped out alone past the perimeter, journal in hand. I sat on a ridge that overlooked the trail we'd coming on. Wind dusted the pages as I marked new data. Over my shoulder, someone approached. It was Vasquez. Mind if I sit? Not tonight, I said gently. Need quiet. He nodded. Fair. But then paused. Hey, Sky? Yeah. You scared that day? In the canyon? I thought for a moment. Not scared. Just ready. He nodded once. That's the part none of us ever really saw coming. You were always ready. We just weren't. He left after that. Didn't say another word. Didn't need to. We hit the upper ridges of Crosswind Divide just before the storm rolled in. No one liked this section. It was too exposed, too silent. No birds. No echo. Just dust and static in the air. The kind of place that made veterans twitchy and rookies forget their training. Vasquez kept muttering about bad energy. Cross said he didn't believe in superstitions, but I noticed he checked the rear more often than usual. I had a feeling in my chest. That feeling you get right before the world tilts. The sky turned gunmetal gray before noon. Wind pulled at our sleeves and howled through rock gaps like it had a voice. Every comm crackled with interference. Even my journal pages fluttered like they wanted to close themselves. We moved tight and quiet, eyes sharp. I counted ridges, watched every gap in the rock like it might breathe. Then, halfway up a slanted ridge, Malcolm went down hard. His foot had caught under a shale plate, snapping at a brutal angle. Medic, someone shouted. I was already moving. Dropped beside him. Checked for shock, blood, brake integrity. The others formed a defensive circle, eyes outward. Malcolm gritted his teeth. I'm good. Just a sprain. It's not, I said. Compound fracture. You're not walking on this. I don't want to slow. You won't, I said, already wrapping the joint. I looked up at Cross. We need a hold. 10 minutes. He nodded. I worked fast, but the wind was shifting fast too. The kind of shift that doesn't show up on forecasts. The kind that comes with eyes behind it. Sky. Vasquez called from 10 paces up the slope. You feel that? I stood slowly. The air was thicker now, like something pressing down. Something's wrong, I said. Then I saw it. A glint, quick, faint, bouncing from a split in the western bluff. I dropped instantly. Down, I shouted. The first shot screamed past, shaving rock and kicking up dust in a cloud. Cross dove behind a shelf. Reed pulled Malcolm behind a boulder. Everyone else dropped instinctively, returning fire even though no target was in sight. Sniper. High West Ridge. I shouted. Single shot, bolt-action rhythm. More rounds echoed, tighter now. Controlled. Clean. Whoever it was, they weren't firing wildly. They were sighting. Hunting. Cross keyed his calm, eyes on. Anyone got angle? No visual. Vasquez shouted. I dropped behind a stone pillar, unholstered my sidearm, and exhaled. This wasn't canyon range. This was steep, crosswind terrain. My shot would be vertical, harder, faster drop. And I didn't have time for a second chance. I remembered something my old unit commander once told me, back when I was still called Whisper instead of Sky. Best way to beat a sniper is to make them forget you were ever there. I waited, listened to the rhythm of the wind. Tick, tick, glint. There, scope flash, top ridge, right of the cedar snag. I fired. 420 meters. No sound but the shot. Then, silence. Then, collapse. Body tumbling through shale and dirt like a sack of gear. Cross called out, status. Target down, I replied. Single hostile. No cover fire. Solo op. Everyone exhaled at once. Reed leaned out from cover. You got eyes like hawk gods. I holstered the sidearm. No, just kept my eyes open while everyone else stopped looking. When we regrouped, the air was different. The kind of quiet that follows a storm, not the weather kind. The truth kind. I helped lift Malcolm onto a pack sled, turned across, and said, we need to move. If he was solo, he was recon. Someone else sent him. Cross nodded. You lead. It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement. We moved out with me at point for the first time. My hands weren't shaking. My legs didn't stutter. Every step felt like it belonged. That night at camp, Vasquez pulled out the wood plaque again. The one they'd started carving. Only now, someone had etched a new line beneath the first. She doesn't flinch. She just listens. The next checkpoint was quiet. Too quiet. No sign of the team we were supposed to meet. Just scattered tracks and the faint smell of burned gear. Cross swept the perimeter. I checked for blood patterns. None. But someone had left fast. Or been forced to. Taylor found a spent shell casing near the camp's rear line. It wasn't ours. They were hit, he said quietly. I nodded. And whoever did it knew the terrain. We dug in. Defensive perimeter. 2 on watch at all times. That night, I dreamed of cold air and broken radios. And a name I hadn't heard in months. Whisper. When I woke up, my sidearm was already in my hand. I'd earned that call sign years ago in a different outfit. Arctic Recon, Northern Ops. Whisper was the name they gave me after I dropped a hostile in a wideout from 300 meters. No spotter, no scope. Just instinct. But after the IED, after the ringing in my left ear wouldn't stop, I walked away. Or at least, that's what the file says. Now it felt like the past was walking back toward me. The next morning, a drone recon picked up movement in a gorge north of our position. Someone setting traps, moving fast, light footprints. It wasn't wildlife. Vasquez said. Could be whoever hit the checkpoint. Cross looked at me. Could be someone who knows your work. I didn't answer. We tracked the trail until mid-afternoon. Found a rock cache hidden near the drop line. Inside, rations, an encrypted comm unit, and a tattered field log. I flipped through it and stopped cold on one page. There, in neat block letters. Priority target, Whisper. Confirmed alive. My stomach tightened. Someone out here wasn't just targeting patrols. They were looking for me. We didn't speak much after that. They saw the name in the logbook. Saw my face tighten. No one asked questions. Not yet. But I could feel it in the air. Curiosity laced with something heavier. Respect. And maybe a little fear. Cross pulled me aside before sundown. Who knows you're alive? No one that should, I said. But someone's looking. We moved camp before nightfall. Set up under overhang and brush. No fires. I took the high watch. No scope, just the stars in my ears. At 0210, I heard movement. Not wildlife. Too methodical. Gravel under careful boots. I keyed the mic, contact. 10 meters out. One person. Waiting. Cross responded. Copy. Engage. Negative. Let me. I moved quiet, down the ridge. Found him kneeling by our old campfire circle. Checking the dirt. Tall, wiry, beard frosted gray. Civilian gear, but military eyes. I stepped out of the shadows. Looking for someone? I asked. He froze. Then smiled slow. I knew you weren't dead. I raised my weapon. You're on restricted ground. He raised his hands, casual. I'm not here for them. I'm here for you, Skylar. Or should I say, Whisper. That name, again. I kept the gun level. You're trespassing. He tilted his head. You were supposed to take the desk. Fade out. But then I hear rumors. Gear Girl in Utah can shoot a Ridge Ghost with a pistol. You really should have stayed invisible. I stepped closer. Why are you here? I'm just the messenger. But the ones hunting you? They remember what you did up north. They're not interested in letting legends rest. I fired. One clean shot, non-lethal. He went down with a cry. Cross and Reed arrived seconds later. Who is he? Reed asked. I holstered my pistol. Reminder. They cuffed him, secured the site. But as I stood there watching the man groan in the dirt, I knew something else. Whoever was out there looking for me, they were getting closer. They pulled what intel they could from the messenger, burner comm logs, coordinates, and one haunting line scrawled in a tiny notebook. Whisper doesn't miss. Disable her eyes. Whoever they were, they didn't want me dead. They wanted me broken. Cross didn't wait. We end this, he said. They come for one of us. They come for all. We tracked the coordinates, an old watchtower deep in a broken valley. Used to be a recon post before it got wiped in a fire 5 years ago. Now it was just stone and ash. Until we found the gear. 2 spotters, 1 long-range shooter, and a recording drone, still blinking. They were watching, studying. Not just me, our whole patrol. I found a cache of printed photos, taken days ago. Me on watch. Me sketching drift lines. Me patching Malcolm's leg. They'd been watching longer than we knew. Cross looked at me. Why didn't you tell us about your past sooner? I paused, then said, because it shouldn't have mattered. And maybe it hadn't, until it did. We rigged charges on the site, cleared what we could, left no trace. As we moved out, Vasquez came up beside me. That name, he said. Whisper. You earned it? I nodded. Back when I thought disappearing was the best way to protect people. And now, I looked out across the valley, where dusk painted the cliffs in amber and blood. Now I know better, I said. Because sometimes disappearing means no one's left standing when the bullets come. We reached base 7 days later. Command met us on the tarmac. A blur of salutes, clipboards, and sideways glances. Someone in a suit asked me if I'd like to be debriefed privately. I said no. If I was going to tell it, I'd tell it once. In the open, I handed them the drone logs, the photos, the field notes, everything we'd gathered. When they asked how I neutralized the sniper in the canyon, I said simply, sidearm. Distance, for 132 meters. They stared. Didn't argue. Didn't have to. My team stood behind me. That was enough. Cross didn't write anything flashy in his final report. Just one sentence at the bottom of the last page. Operative Dane is no longer background support. She's the reason this team came home. A week later, they offered me a new position, field recon lead. I turned it down. Not because I didn't want it, but because I'd already learned the most important thing. You don't need stripes to lead. You just need to stand your ground when it counts. I stayed on as logistics and overwatch. Still cleaned scopes in the morning. Still patched wounds before they got serious. Still hauled rope and gauze and water. But now they called me Sky, and they listened when I spoke. The plaque Vasquez carved ended up mounted at the base range. Below it, someone scratched a second line with a dull blade. Don't mistake the quiet ones. They've just been watching. I never told anyone the full story of my last deployment up north. I never needed to. My scars don't talk, and my shot speaks for itself. One afternoon, Reed asked if I ever thought about disappearing again. I shook my head. No, I've already done that part. Now I stay where I'm needed. In the back when it makes sense. Up front when it doesn't. Because sometimes, the last line of defense isn't a wall. It's a woman with a small build, steady hands, and a history no one bothered to read. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't always get to choose the moment. But you do get to choose how ready you are when it comes. And when it did, I didn't flinch. I pulled the trigger. And the line held.